And welcome back to The Full View. The Presidency says it's yet to receive a letter addressed to Cyril Ramaphosa regarding the bad treatment of African nationals in Africa. Former DA leader and chief activist for One South Africa, Musi Maimane, recently tweeted a letter to South Africa's leader. In it, he said, "Dear Cyril Ramaphosa, alongside with Nelson Chamisa, Bobi Wine, Lazarus, Chakwera and Zitto, Kabwe, they are appealing to President Ramaphosa as chairperson of the African Union to engage with the People's Republic of China in respect to the abuse of African nationals in China." The letter is by opposition leaders of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Malawi and Tanzania. Maimane joins us now via Skype. A very good evening to you, Mr. Maimane. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Most notably, let me first start perhaps with the Presidency's response that they have yet to receive such a letter. Have you sent one officially, formally to the Presidency or the African Union?
Good evening and good evening to fellow South Africans. I have certainly got an acknowledgement of receipt from the Presidency, acknowledging that ultimately they have received our communication. I would hope that they urgently treat this matter. It's a matter that is bipartisan. It's a matter that we must stand together as Africans to say, regardless of where you come from, COVID should never be a space that enhances racism, that we must stand together as a continent. And therefore, I'm grateful for the leaders who from all the respective countries have joined in. And we would hope for fellow African leaders to join us and say, let us stand united. Let us ensure that we don't enhance racism. We have a virus called corona that does not know race, creed, culture, background. And it is time now, if we're going to respond collectively, that we fight the battle together and succeed.
When you say you received acknowledgement of the letter from the Presidency, might I ask from whom? And I say this pointedly because we spoke to spokesperson in the Presidency, Ms. Kusela Diko, a short while ago. That was about an hour ago. She said they have no receipt of such letter, and the best they know of it is what they've seen on Twitter.
Well, obviously, like many South Africans, our communication points with the Presidency are in their official communication channels. And I have written, and if Ms. Kusela would like to get the letter herself, I'm happy to do so. And I've communicated to the private office of the President, as has always been traditional when I engaged him back from when he, as a member of Parliament, and now equally so as a citizen and as chief activist of the One South Africa movement, wanted to ensure that he gets through the same channels. And so I will ensure that if they don't have the letter, this is not about trying to play technicalities. I'm bored of this is not a matter we can politic about. This is a matter of ensuring that more than anything, we respond together. And I would hope that the Presidency stands up. President Ramaphosa is the chair of the African Union. We must unite on this matter. And we cannot advance racism. And ultimately, my other request to him is a simple one. I'm saying to him, please, if he can ensure that we repatriate Africans in China who want to come back home, this would be ideal, as many of them are making contact saying they would like to return home. And this is a simple call, and I believe ordinary citizens will be part of making a similar call.
Obviously, you've co-authored this letter with the leaders, opposition party leaders of, as we mentioned, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Tanzania, Uganda as well. In your collaboration, you talk about the need for an investigation. Have you spoken about how should that be carried out? What would the terms of reference be, especially given the fact that you have referred this to the African Union and its chair, President Cyril Ramaphosa?
The bilateral relations that many African states have with not only China, the People's Republic of China, but also on a BRICS Council, this matter can be further interrogated. And my call is simply to say this, that one, an investigation as to the validity of many of the incidents, we know them to be factually so. We have all of us seen reports to do so. Secondly, the call is that the Chinese leadership be able to tell its own citizens that conduct cannot be accepted. COVID cannot advance racism, and it certainly cannot be discriminatory against African citizens. And then furthermore, the simple call is to say that once action must be taken against citizens who continue to advance racism against Africans. It is something we cannot accept. We have to ultimately, and that the African Union must be able to take a strong lead on, so that we provide leadership in the continent. We can demonstrate that in a global pandemic, it's not a time to be advancing racism or certainly attitudes that we're trying to set aside, that we can stand united and as a global society be able to respond to this very crucial pandemic.
So China's foreign minister has said not only are they aware of the matter, they are appalled by it. They've appealed to their citizens to desist from such action. Our own Minister of International Relations and Cooperation has said that the Chinese government as a whole does not support that, and the only incidents that they're aware of is in Guangzhou. Beyond this, again, you say you've called for an investigation. What type of investigation would then stand alongside these statements?
No, the statements are most welcome. We need to now get to the bottom of where people are perpetrating acts of racism against Africans, and to ensure that those in the best way possible are brought to book. We cannot tolerate racism at any point. So this investigation must move further. It's one thing for us to condemn such actions, because if ultimately they create a sense where there's economic exclusion, I've heard of incidents where people have been asked to leave their homes in particular parts of China. So if that continues, how do you then expect for those Africans to build a life and to continue? We've seen in certain instances where people have gone to shopping centers and have been kicked out. Now, those are acts, in our view, that move beyond just a simple attitude of racism, but the very acts that must be condemned. Therefore, it's one thing to condemn, but I think ultimately, as we would here in South Africa, to say such actions not only must be investigated criminally, but decisive action must be taken, because if you tolerate it, it will become a situation where, as we have seen in other parts of the world, you advance xenophobic attitudes, you advance racist actions, you stigmatize people who are COVID positive, where ultimately you create an attitude where we cannot fight the virus, we'll end up fighting each other. So further to the investigation and the call, I believe that serious actions must be taken against all of those who are perpetrating such evil in the world, such as racism.
There was a tweet that went viral of Nigeria's Speaker of the House of Representatives, where he was speaking to their ambassador to China in Nigeria, and he spoke about how strong the language he was using to interrogate what's going on there. And the word he used was, I know I'm being very undiplomatic, and I want to talk about that. Diplomacy, obviously, a very tight rope that one has to walk. The fact that China is one of our biggest trading partners, we depend on it, on aid. Do you think that that presents a major challenge in just how far we can go, how hard we can press?
No, and I think that it is something that the Chinese government itself would equally come on board and say, we also do not accept that. And I think more than anything, if further, the Chinese government must be able to apologize even to Africans who are in their countries, so that it communicates an attitude that says we are not supporters of such actions. And therefore, the call must simply be understood as one, there's bilateral and there's an agreement. If all of us are on the same side, fighting against COVID-19 and fighting against a virus that is impacting the world, then I think we can unite. It's not a question of us versus China in a diplomatic or trade sense. It is us uniting globally to say attitudes, whatever citizens. If the same incidents were taking place in South Africa against anybody else who was carrying COVID-19, I think the South African government must take strong action. The South African government must be able to say, we do not tolerate attitudes against other Africans or any other person. We build a united effort against an approach to this matter. Because ultimately, beyond this matter of COVID-19, trade must continue. We must ensure that we build a leadership that advances human rights, the rights for people to stand together. We must build a leadership even here in Africa that simply says, as we build trade amongst each other, we do not advance attitudes that are racist, that we have a health response and an economic response that ensures that we can build a continent that thrives. And I think it will be welcome both from the People's Republic of China and certainly the countries listed in the letter, and many more who will be joining the fight to ensure that we build a resilient Africa that will fight against this disease.
Musi, Maimane, thank you very much. Speaking to us there via Skype on behalf of other opposition leaders who co-wrote this letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa, the opposition leaders of Zimbabwe, Malawi, Uganda, Tanzania, saying that they're calling for an investigation led by the African Union. President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, at the helm of that. And what are your thoughts on this? Further going forward to say that as a sign of good faith, China must apologize to African citizens who are in China and enduring this discrimination. Some of them, as he mentioned, kicked out of their homes, apartments, being forcibly tested for coronavirus, from what we're hearing, even repeatedly tested, and in some cases, as you saw, some of those images going viral on Twitter, being refused entry into malls. Share your thoughts with us on this at Full View.